You ever seen a hawk tear a $3,000 surveillance drone out of the sky like it was a squeaky toy? I have. Because I trained the hawk. And the drone? It belonged to the HOA president who was using it to spy on my wife sunbathing. I'm not saying I declared war. I'm saying I ended it before she even realized the skies had rules, and my team wore feathers. I never wanted trouble. When Dana and I moved into our quiet little HOA community just outside the city, we were looking for peace. A little sunshine, some backyard barbecue, maybe the occasional poker night with neighbors who minded their own business. What we didn't expect was an HOA president named Karen, yes, that's actually her name, who ran the neighborhood like it was a military base, and she was the 4-star general with binoculars permanently glued to her face. Now, Dana isn't the kind of person to stir drama. She's sweet, artistic, and frankly, far more patient than me. On sunny weekends, she liked to relax on a lounge chair out back, headphones in, lemonade at her side, tanning under the sun like any normal human enjoying her own property. But a few weeks ago, she came in early from her sunbathing session with a weird look on her face. "I swear something was watching me," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. At first, I laughed. We've got high fences, dense hedges, and it's not like any neighbor could peek over unless they climbed a tree with night vision goggles. I figured it was just a squirrel making noise or some paranoid thought after too much true crime. I told her she was safe, gave her a hug, and let it go. That was mistake number 1. 2 days later, I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard it, a soft, mechanical whirring noise. Faint, but unmistakable. I looked up through the window just in time to see a white quadcopter drone hovering above the backyard. It had a camera mounted on the front, pointing directly down. It hung there for a few seconds before zipping off toward the row of houses behind us. My stomach turned. I ran outside, looked around, but it was gone. Dana came out behind me in a robe, clearly shaken. Was that a drone? That's when I knew we had a problem. Now, I'm not some conspiracy theorist. I believe in technology, privacy, and locking your damn front door. But there's a line, and that drone? That was way over it. We decided to wait and watch, hoping maybe it was a one-off. Maybe some kid got a birthday toy. Maybe I could just let it go. That was mistake number 2. The drone came back the next day. And the day after. Every time Dana was outside, it would buzz in like a tiny flying peeping Tom. We tried to shoo it away, even hung up bedsheets as barriers, but the thing was nimble. It hovered, dodged, repositioned. My wife began to feel like a zoo exhibit. I set up my own little surveillance system, motion cams, high-angle lenses. I caught footage of the drone retreating toward a cream-colored colonial 2 streets over. And guess who lives there? Karen. Now, Karen wasn't just any HOA president. She had laminated pamphlets about grass blade length. She measured mailbox heights and reported children for unauthorized sidewalk chalk art. She hosted mandatory monthly HOA meetings and once wrote a 7-paragraph email about why wind chimes were a violation of the Auditory Tranquility Clause. I marched over to her house with the footage and a polite but firm attitude. I didn't want drama. I just wanted her to stop. She opened the door halfway, raised an eyebrow like I'd just stepped onto Buckingham Palace property, and said, "Yes?" I showed her the clip on my phone. "Karen, this drone keeps showing up over my yard. It's making my wife uncomfortable. I traced it back here. Is it yours?" She didn't even blink. "It's HOA property," she said, like that made it okay. "We're allowed to monitor for rule violations. It's within my rights." "You're not the NSA, Karen. My wife is sunbathing. On our private property." "Well," she said, voice like glass, "perhaps she shouldn't be laying out in such revealing attire where the community can see." I stared at her. "You mean where your drone can see?" She smiled. "Some of us have standards." And that was mistake number 3, hers. I reported the drone to local authorities. They said it was a gray area, since airspace above properties gets tricky, and the HOA had some loophole-filled documentation that technically allowed for property inspections. Of course, that was written by Karen herself. In retaliation, Karen sent me 3 HOA citations in 1 week. 1 for unsightly bird activity, 1 for overgrown grass on the north perimeter, and 1, my personal favorite, for non-compliant patio furniture. She included photos, taken from the drone. That's when I stopped playing nice. Now, here's the thing Karen didn't know. My job? I train birds of prey. Raptors, hawks, falcons, owls. I work in wildlife control, keeping natural balance in corporate parks, stadiums, airports. You've got pigeons messing up your stadium? You call me. I bring in a hawk and your pigeons leave for good. It's legal, licensed, and very, very effective. And drones? Birds hate them. So I pulled Athena out of her enclosure. She's a red-tailed hawk, wingspan nearly 4 feet, and a grudge against anything that buzzes near her. She's taken down invasive crows midair, and once yanked a plastic Halloween bat out of a tree mid-swoop. I spent 3 days training her specifically to target drones. We ran drills with mock drones. She adapted fast. Dana and I set the stage. A sunny Saturday afternoon. She laid out in the backyard with a sun hat and a book. The drone, like clockwork, appeared within 10 minutes. I gave Athena the signal. She launched like a missile. The drone's operator must have seen her coming because it tried to climb, fast. But Athena's faster. She tore into it with talons sharp enough to slice leather. The drone spiraled, smoking, and crashed into my lawn in a pile of wings and shattered plastic. I picked up the pieces, walked straight to Karen's porch, and left the broken drone in a basket with a note that said, "Next time, I unleash the falcon." Karen didn't say a word. But the next morning, I noticed something new in the sky. 3 more drones. I smiled. Because now it was personal. There's something oddly satisfying about watching nature assert dominance over technology. When Athena snatched that first drone out of the air like it owed her rent, I thought Karen might take the hint. I figured even she had a limit. But I underestimated 2 things: the depth of her entitlement and the size of her HOA budget. Because the very next morning, 3 new drones were patrolling the sky like a miniature air force, buzzing in coordinated loops over my backyard like I was smuggling illegal patio umbrellas. I wasn't just irritated anymore. I was impressed. It takes a special kind of petty to not only replace a destroyed surveillance drone overnight but to upgrade your entire fleet. This wasn't about HOA violations anymore. This was a full-blown turf war. And in turf wars, you don't just hold your ground. You dominate it. Dana was losing patience too. She couldn't step outside without one of those robotic vultures hovering nearby, acting like it was performing an aerial ballet. She stopped sunbathing entirely. She even started drawing the blinds during the day. That was the final straw. My home wasn't a prison, and I wasn't about to let Karen turn our life into a reality show. I stood in the backyard that evening, watching the mechanical birds zip around the sky. Athena perched beside me, feathers ruffled, eyes sharp. She was ready. But 1 bird against 3 drones? I needed reinforcements. Luckily, I had some. Loki was a peregrine falcon I'd raised from a rescue program, sleek and terrifyingly fast. If Athena was the brute force of the operation, Loki was the scalpel. And then there was Morty, a massive barred owl with a lazy demeanor and a habit of staring into people's souls like he knew their internet history. Morty wasn't fast, but he was silent. And he worked best at night. The plan was coming together. Training the birds to target drones wasn't difficult, it was just a matter of association. Drones made noise, moved like prey, and offered a satisfying crunch when caught. I started by tying small treats to fake drones and using voice command. Within days, all 3 birds were conditioned to treat any hovering object as a target. It was basically the opposite of Amazon Prime Air's safety guidelines. I spent a few days prepping my property for the showdown. mounted a few cameras, cleared the yard, even set up a speaker system to blast music during the strike. Because if I was going to launch an avian assault, it was going to have a soundtrack. I chose Ride of the Valkyries. Dramatic, yes, but appropriate. When Saturday came, I was ready. Dana was in on it too. She set up a fake sunbathing scene, complete with an inflatable dummy that we named Blonda. She even smeared sunscreen on its plastic face for authenticity. The drones arrived right on time. One zipped in low, another hovered high, the third circled like a curious wasp. I could almost hear Karen cackling from her porch. I gave the signal. Athena took to the air first, her wings slicing through the sky like she was born for vengeance. Loki followed seconds later, a blur of feathers and fury. Morty, of course, didn't move. He was scheduled for the night shift. The drones scrambled. One tried to climb, another banked left, but it was too late. Athena slammed into the first drone with a metallic crunch. It spiraled down into the neighbor's kiddie pool. Loki locked onto the second drone mid-air and, in an almost graceful swoop, shredded its rotor blade and sent it careening into my hedge. The third drone had a fighting chance, until Loki looped back and gave it a love tap from underneath, sending it into a death spin like a drunk hummingbird. It landed in Karen's front yard, right next to her decorative flamingo. I retrieved the wreckage, laid the broken drones in a neat row, and snapped a photo. Posted it to the neighborhood group chat with the caption, HOA air traffic violation resolved. No further complaints expected. The chat exploded. Some neighbors laughed. Others shared their own drone horror stories. One guy claimed Karen had hovered a drone outside his garage during a barbecue and cited him for having excessive smoke. A woman said she caught a drone watching her kids in the pool. Suddenly, I wasn't the only one mad. Karen didn't respond publicly, but that afternoon she marched to my door, holding one of the broken drones like it was a wounded child. "You've crossed the line," she said, voice trembling with self-righteous rage. "This is sabotage. I will have you removed from this neighborhood." I looked at her, calm as ever. "You were spying on my wife." "I was performing my duties as HOA president." I nodded slowly. "And I was performing mine. Wildlife control." She narrowed her eyes. "I will press charges." I smiled. "Go ahead. The police already know. I've got licenses, permits, and plenty of video evidence, including footage of your drones violating FAA guidelines and peeking through windows." She didn't have a comeback. Just stood there, clutching her fallen drone like a scene from some low-budget sci-fi movie. Then she turned and stomped away, drone fragments rattling in her arms. But the fight wasn't over. That night, I spotted a new drone. Smaller, stealthier, probably one of those night vision-equipped type. It hovered silently, low to the ground, behind the trees near our yard. That's when Morty came into play. Owls don't fly. They float. Morty launched from his perch like a ghost, glided silently above the grass, and snatched the night drone mid-hover. Not a single sound. Just a soft thump, followed by a small plastic clatter in the leaves. I retrieved the drone, checked the camera, and guess what? It was still recording. On the SD card, footage of multiple homes. Bedrooms, living rooms, even someone's bathroom window. Karen had officially crossed into criminal territory. I backed up the footage, time-stamped it, and called my buddy Darren from the local sheriff's department. He wasn't just a cop. He was also a former client, someone I helped get rid of a raccoon infestation from his barn using Morty. He took one look at the drone evidence and whistled. "She's gonna have a rough time explaining this," he said. I nodded. "Good. Because this isn't about birds and drones anymore. It's about privacy." He promised to escalate it. Meanwhile, I patched up the yard, gave the birds extra snacks, and checked on Dana. She looked more relaxed than she had in weeks. "That was oddly satisfying," she said, watching Morty preen on his perch. "I told you. Raptors get results." I looked out over the yard, the drone remains, the peaceful sky. And I knew Karen wasn't done. But neither was I. Friday came faster than I expected, and with it, the smell of scorched pride and desperation clinging to the air like overcooked barbecue. The HOA board had called a formal vote to suspend Karen indefinitely. It should have been a done deal. But Karen being Karen, she didn't just show up. She stormed into that meeting like a fallen dictator demanding a recount, dragging a suitcase full of papers, a laptop, and what I'm almost certain was a makeshift presentation titled, "Why I'm the Hero This Neighborhood Needs." She wore sunglasses indoors, a scarf like she'd just left a courtroom drama, and enough perfume to fumigate a greenhouse. Dana and I sat toward the back of the community center, where the meeting was being held. Half the neighborhood had shown up, which was impressive considering most of them would rather fake their own death than attend an HOA function. There was tension in the air, people murmuring, exchanging glances, checking their phones. Most had already seen the footage. The drones, the birds, the flaming wreckage in my fire pit. Some neighbors brought popcorn. One guy wore a hawk-themed t-shirt that said, "Neighborhood Watch, now with talons." I liked him immediately. Greg, the mild-mannered board member who'd first approached me, took the stage and tapped the mic. "Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're here to address a series of complaints involving the misuse of HOA funds, unauthorized surveillance, and behavior unbecoming of a board president." Karen stood up before he even finished and marched to the front, dragging her suitcase behind her like it contained nuclear launch codes. "With all due respect, this is a smear campaign," she began, flipping open a binder thick enough to kill a small animal. "I have worked tirelessly for this community. I have improved property values, streamlined regulation enforcement, and introduced the neighborhood drone program for the safety of all residents." A collective groan rolled through the crowd. "Safety?" someone called out. "You flew one into my daughter's birthday party." Karen ignored them and clicked her laptop, projecting a slide labeled "Strategic Aerial Monitoring Zones" onto the wall. These were carefully planned flight paths to ensure no unlawful activity was taking place. Greg cleared his throat. "Karen, you never obtained permission to deploy these drones, let alone allocate budget for them. We've reviewed the account. You funneled HOA dues into private contractors, surveillance equipment, and exotic pet deterrents." Dana elbowed me at that last part. I shrugged. Maybe she had tried to scare off the birds. Karen adjusted her scarf, clearly sweating now. "It was necessary. That man's yard," she pointed at me like I was Lex Luthor, "has been a hub of unauthorized wildlife activity. Dangerous birds, unregulated structures, and his wife." "Careful," I said loudly. The room hushed. Karen faltered. I was merely documenting ordinance violations. By flying drones over private property, including bedrooms, including bathrooms, including a drone that crashed into a toddler pool." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then frantically clicked to a slide that simply said, "Community Pride." Greg stepped in. "Let's vote. All in favor of suspending Karen effective immediately, pending legal review and a formal ethics investigation, say aye." The chorus of "aye" was deafening. Only two people stayed silent. Karen and a guy in the corner who looked like he accidentally walked into the wrong meeting and was too embarrassed to leave. Karen slammed her laptop shut and made a dramatic exit, suitcase rattling behind her like a defeated villain boarding a Greyhound bus. The moment she was gone, people clapped. Someone high-fived me. Someone else offered Athena a raw steak. But just because Karen was gone didn't mean she was finished. That became clear 3 days later, when an envelope arrived on our doorstep. No postage. Hand-delivered. Inside, a letter from a lawyer. Karen was suing me for willful destruction of property, emotional distress, and operating an unlicensed aerial defense system. I laughed so hard I nearly pulled a muscle. Dana didn't laugh. "She's serious." "Of course she is," I said, tossing the letter onto the kitchen table. "She's lost control and she's trying to find a way to claw it back." "But can she really sue you?" "She can try. but she won't win. Still, I wasn't going to be reckless. I called my friend Ashley, a sharp attorney with a specialty in bizarre civil dispute. She once defended a guy who built a moat around his trailer and claimed it was an art installation. If anyone could handle Karen, it was Ashley. We met at her office the next day. I laid out everything: drone footage, Raptor training permits, the HOA emails, the footage from Morty's night takedown. She watched the videos twice, then leaned back in her chair, grinning. "This is gold," she said. "I hope she takes it to court." I'd love to watch a judge try to process the phrase hawk-based counter-surveillance. A week later, Karen officially filed the lawsuit. Court was set for the following month. The community, of course, found out almost immediately, and what started as neighborhood gossip turned into full-blown local news. A reporter from a small-town outlet showed up, asking questions about the bird war. They interviewed me, then Dana, then Athena, who screeched directly into the microphone and became an instant meme. HOA Karen vs. the Bird Man trended on social media for 3 days. Local kids started drawing sidewalk chalk hawk. Someone printed bumper stickers. A nearby brewery released a limited edition pale ale called Talented Neighbor. The town was divided, but mostly for entertainment's sake. And in the background, Karen continued plotting. One night, just before bed, I saw another drone. Not over my house, over Greg's. It hovered above his backyard, lights off, camera aimed at his porch. I grabbed my binoculars and confirmed it. Same design. Karen hadn't just come after me, she was trying to intimidate the board now. I texted Greg. He replied, "She's insane." I replied, "Want to borrow a hawk?" He said yes. So I brought Loki over the next morning and taught Greg the basic. Within hours, that drone was downed and Greg was the happiest suburban dad I'd ever seen. By the end of the week, 3 other neighbors had reported drones, and 2 more asked me about hiring birds. I wasn't trying to start a business, but I was beginning to realize this was bigger than me. Karen's obsession with control had turned privacy into a neighborhood concern. What started as her vendetta against my wife's sunbathing had now evolved into a full-blown crusade to dominate everyone's airspace. And people were done with it. The court date was approaching. Karen was quiet. Too quiet. I had a feeling she was saving something, one last move. And whatever it was, it wouldn't be subtle. That was fine. Because neither were we. The courtroom smelled like stale carpet, fluorescent lights, and decades of ego. Karen strutted in like she was the prosecution, judge, and jury rolled into one. She wore an ivory pantsuit, a shiny leather binder clutched under her arm like a holy relic, and her signature look of superiority glued firmly to her face. She didn't acknowledge anyone, not even her own lawyer, who looked like he'd taken the case just for the story. Dana squeezed my hand as we sat down, and even though I knew we were ready, part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. A full-blown civil case over drones, hawks, and sunbathing. The judge was a compact man with a permanent frown and reading glasses halfway down his nose. His name was Judge Marshall, and rumor had it he once dismissed a case by pretending to fall asleep. I liked him already. He gave both attorneys a tight nod, then looked down at the case file like it had personally insulted him. Karen's lawyer stood first. He was a thin, fidgety man named Cole who had the energy of a malfunctioning printer. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that the defendant," he pointed at me with a flourish, "deliberately and maliciously used trained raptors, birds of prey, Your Honor, to destroy property belonging to my client. Furthermore, we believe this was done in a campaign of harassment against her lawful duties as president of the Homeowners Association." Judge Marshall raised an eyebrow. "Birds of prey?" Karen's lawyer nodded solemnly. "Yes, Your Honor. Hawks, falcons, and 1 owl. Possibly more." The judge sighed and turned to Ashley, my attorney, who looked like Christmas had come early. "Your Honor," she began with a smile, We will demonstrate that my client acted entirely within his legal rights as both a certified wildlife control specialist and a private citizen defending his property from unauthorized surveillance. The drones in question were operated without consent, without regulatory approval, and were used to capture footage that, if Your Honor permits, will show clear violations of personal privacy. Karen's jaw tightened. She whispered something to Cole, who started sweating harder. The judge gestured for them to continue. The trial kicked off with Karen's testimony. She was calm, rehearsed, and absolutely committed to the role of the innocent victim. She talked about her love for the community, how she only ever wanted to keep it safe, and how the drone program was designed for community oversight, not personal enjoyment. Then she got theatrical. "I live in fear," she said, hand dramatically over her chest. "Every time I hear a bird outside, I wonder, is it watching me? Is it going to strike?" Ashley leaned over and whispered, "She thinks we trained a bird hit squad. This is gold." Karen went on to describe how the drones were humanely operated and always within FAA regulations, which would have been hilarious if it weren't for the next part. Her lawyer wheeled out a monitor and played drone footage as evidence. The courtroom watched as the video showed blurry clips of houses, yards, and yes, one very clear image of Dana reading a book in our backyard. The moment that frame froze on the screen, the temperature in the room changed. Dana's expression didn't shift, but her grip on my hand tightened. The judge cleared his throat loudly. "Was this footage obtained with permission?" he asked, clearly displeased. Karen didn't answer. Her lawyer fumbled. "We believe the footage was incidental." Ashley stood. "Your Honor, may we now present our counter-evidence?" The judge nodded. Ashley walked up to the monitor with the casual confidence of someone holding a winning lottery ticket. She played our footage. First came the attack. Athena ripping through a drone like it was made of cotton. Then the neighborhood videos followed. Interviews with residents, footage of drones hovering over multiple properties, and, finally, the drone we recovered from Greg's yard, complete with timestamps and internal logs, proving Karen's drones had been used to monitor people without consent. Then Ashley dropped the final bomb. "We'd also like to submit this expert testimony," she said, pulling up a video call with an FAA compliance officer who confirmed that Karen's drone flights violated multiple federal guidelines, including nighttime operations without clearance and flying over people without waivers. The judge looked more irritated with every word. Karen's face had gone pale. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to dig a hole in the carpet and crawl into it. Then the judge leaned forward. "I have reviewed the drone footage. I have heard the expert testimony. And frankly, I'm disturbed." He looked directly at Karen. "You were not only operating surveillance drones over private property without consent, but you did so under the authority of an HOA title that does not give you such power. Furthermore, the use of HOA funds to finance this activity is deeply questionable and may be grounds for further legal action by your community." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. The judge turned to me. "As for the defendant's use of trained birds of prey to intercept said drones, while unorthodox, it is not unlawful, especially given his credentials and the context of repeated invasions of privacy." Case dismissed. I exhaled. Dana smiled. Ashley gave me a wink. Karen, however, didn't move. She stood completely still for a moment, as if trying to process the idea that her perfect record of neighborhood domination had finally crumbled. After the ruling, reporters swarmed the courthouse step. The story had gained traction over the past few weeks, and now that the verdict was in, the headlines were wild. "Falconer defeats HOA Karen in aerial privacy case" was one. Another simply read, "Birds 1, drones 0. Back at home, the neighbors had already begun celebrating. Someone put up a banner that said, "Raptor justice served," and Greg hosted a barbecue in his backyard, complete with grilled chicken wings and drone-shaped cookies. Dana and I arrived with the birds in tow. Athena got her own perch, Loki preened like he owned the place, and Morty, bless him, napped under a tree, completely unimpressed by all the noise. Later that night, I stood on our porch, looking up at the stars. The air was still, peaceful. No buzzing, no whirring, no little blinking lights creeping through the dark. Karen hadn't returned to her house. Word was she'd left town, at least for now. The HOA was under new leadership, and the drone program had been permanently banned. Dana joined me with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She leaned against my shoulder and whispered, "Do you think it's really over?" I smiled. For now. Because the truth is, people like Karen don't stay gone forever. They regroup. They rebrand. They come back with clipboards and bylaws. But the next time she, or anyone like her, tries something, we'll be ready. And we won't even have to raise our voices. We'll just raise our birds. Spring rolled in with just the right balance of sunshine and breeze, the kind of weather that made you want to sit outside with a cold drink and forget the world existed. For the first time in weeks, Dana was back to sunbathing without a trace of hesitation. There were no drones buzzing overhead, no paranoid glances toward the sky, no Karen hiding behind hedges with a remote in hand. The neighborhood had settled. Quiet replaced chaos. The only sound in the yard came from the birds, real birds, singing like we'd finally earned our peace. But under that calm surface, I could still feel a flicker of tension. Not the kind that keeps you awake at night, but the kind that reminds you battles have endings, not guarantees. Karen's house remained vacant. Rumor had it she'd gone to stay with her sister in some town 3 states over, though others claimed she was holed up in a lawyer's office plotting her next HOA-based revolution. The board had officially stripped her of all titles, and a new president, Marlene, had been voted in. Marlene was the polar opposite of Karen. She was warm, approachable, and openly admitted she couldn't tell the difference between a zoning regulation and a soup recipe. Which, honestly, made her perfect. Despite everything, life was slipping back into a rhythm I hadn't realized I missed. The birds settled into their routines. Athena had taken a liking to a new perch I'd built in the far corner of the yard, where she could overlook her kingdom. Loki began visiting the neighbors' yards, performing little aerial loops for the kids who now adored him. Morty, true to form, continued to do absolutely nothing all day, and still got more praise than I did. I even found time to build a small aviary near the back fence, not for containment, but for demonstration and education. It became a local curiosity. Parents brought their kids, people asked questions, and before long, I was hosting informal Raptor awareness weekends. It was never the plan, but somehow, the birds had turned into celebrities. The viral footage from the drone takedowns hadn't slowed down either. I got a message from a wildlife docuseries producer asking if I'd consider a short feature. Another company reached out offering a small licensing deal to use footage in an anti-drone PSA. One of the strangest inquiries came from a film student who wanted to create a short animation of Athena as a futuristic superhero. I asked if Morty could be her sidekick who sleeps through all the action. She loved it. Dana, who had gone from sunbathing in secrecy to proudly owning every inch of her own backyard again, decided to lean into the madness. She designed a line of t-shirts with silhouettes of hawks tearing through drones, along with quotes from the trial. One simply said, "Unlicensed aerial defense system," across the front. They sold better than expected. At one point, I joked that we were going to become the accidental face of suburban resistance. She smiled and said, "Better than being the face of defeat." Then, one afternoon, it happened. Another drone. It wasn't Karen's style. It was slower, clumsier, and definitely store-bought. But it still hovered. Still pointed its camera toward the house. I watched it from the porch, letting my pulse settle before reacting. Dana joined me seconds later. She followed my gaze, then looked at me. "Karen." I shook my head. "Don't think so. Feels more like a copycat." Dana folded her arms. "You want to send a message?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the side yard, whistled once, and Athena rose from her perch. She stretched, took to the sky, and eyed the drone. It didn't even try to run. One swipe, and it fell like a rock, landing somewhere near the street. I didn't chase it. Whoever flew it would get the message. Later that evening, a sheepish teenager rang the doorbell. He held the crumpled remains of the drone in his hands, looking like someone who just got caught stealing from Santa. Sorry," he mumbled. "I was just messing around. Didn't think it'd, get destroyed." I looked at him, then down at the wreckage. "You know, in some neighborhoods, that'd just be called a warning." He blinked. "Am I in trouble?" Dana stepped beside me. "Depends. Are you going to do it again?" He shook his head so hard his hat flew off. "No way. That bird's terrifying." We let him go. He ran. After that, the story took on a new kind of life. Kids started treating the whole thing like local folklore. Athena became a legend. People called her the Feathered Guardian. I didn't mind. The attention was weird, but at least it wasn't hostile anymore. The HOA began investing in privacy fencing and started an initiative to educate residents about airspace rights. Greg even proposed a neighborhood falconry demonstration day. I didn't think it would get approved, but to my surprise, it passed unanimously. The day of the event arrived with perfect weather. I stood in the park field with all 5 birds perched behind me. A modest crowd had gathered. Families, board members, even Marlene holding a clipboard and a big smile. I walked everyone through how the birds were trained, how wildlife control worked, and yes, how hawks viewed drones as prey. At the end, I let Athena do a show-off loop in the sky while Blitz dive-bombed a foam decoy I tossed into the air. The applause was unexpected but deeply satisfying. That night, after the cages were cleaned, the gear was stored, and the park was quiet, Dana and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset. She leaned against me, humming a song I didn't recognize. "You think it's really over this time?" she asked. I thought about it. Karen was still out there, somewhere, probably muttering about bylaws and property codes into a half-empty wine glass. Maybe she'd come back. Maybe someone else like her would show up, armed with gadgets and grievances. But it didn't matter anymore. Because we weren't afraid. We weren't vulnerable. We had each other, a flock of feathery friends, and a community that had learned to stand up instead of shrink down. I sipped my lemonade and gave a lazy whistle. Athena, perched nearby, turned her head toward the sky. If trouble ever came back, we'd see it coming. And this time, we wouldn't just be ready. We'd be airborne.